Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Welcome to the murder part. Tonight we will be looking at the case of Kristin Smart. First, I want to welcome my co-host, Jeff. How you doing?
Very good. How are you?
Doing well. Doing well. Excited about this case?
Yeah, this one's super interesting. Most of them are, but especially this one.
And it has an update.
Yeah.
So, a lot going on with it. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing very well.
What do you think about Kristin Smart?
I think it's a very sad case. I think it's taken way too long to get to an update.
Yeah, terribly lengthy in terms of how long this case has been sitting with really no activity.
But it is a very interesting case.
Yeah, this case is certainly compelling. It appears to be it was a missing person, and now it appears to be a homicide case. And really, I think most everybody suspected it was a homicide case a long time ago. So let's take a look at some of the background of this case, and we'll talk about it. Kristin Denise Smart was born in Germany on February 20, 1977, but she was raised in Stockton, California, having moved there with her family when she was young. She was a student at California Polytechnic State University. Now, I always mess up the name of this town. Anybody?
San Luis Obispo.
There you go. I'll let you handle that.
San Luis Obispo.
That's also
California.
in California, and it has its own police department.
It does. Yeah, the Cal Poly has its own police department.
Right. Well, both do, right?
Yes. The San Luis Obispo has its own police department. At least it's a sheriff's office, and then Cal Poly University has its own police department as well.
Yeah, and I think I know the university police were involved early in the case.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then we moved to the local police.
Mm-hmm. And then it goes up to the state police and then the FBI.
And the FBI. So really everybody jumped in on this one.
And we'll talk about it, but the university police were kind of a problem there at the very beginning.
Yeah, it's curious that these cases never start off with the most competent law enforcement. They always start off with the most local, which is often not really the best.
Well, I think if they start off with the most competent, they get solved real quick.
It'd be too easy.
And then we don't review them because it's over. Like there's no issue.
Yeah.
Job security?
For everybody.
I mean, for everybody. It keeps them around. They get to keep investigating.
So we move forward to May of 1996. Kristin Smart was finishing her freshman year. Had just taken, I think, the exams right toward the end of the year. It was in May. Yeah. She was a little bit discouraged, not having a great time. You know, it's a transition period.
And she wasn't doing phenomenally academically. Like she was really struggling with a lot of things, being away from her family. You know, and she had only a few friends while she was there. I mean, she had some, but she was spending a little bit more time trying to be social, I think, than doing her study stuff. But that weekend, which was Memorial Day weekend, in '96, she decided that she wanted, after all of this exam stuff, she wanted to go out and blow off some steam. So she decided to go out to a birthday party.
That's right. This was on May 24. But as you said, Memorial Day weekend for this. So not a lot of students in the dorm rooms, and she lived in one of the dorms. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to kind of set the picture, you have not many people on campus, not many students relative to how many there would usually be, but a lot of partying.
Yeah.
So the party to student ratio very high this particular weekend.
And a long weekend, a holiday weekend that's prime for parties as well. Not a whole lot going on after that.
Yeah, and every now and then I've heard, it's a rumor that these type of parties can involve alcohol.
I mean, we wouldn't want to speculate on the presence of alcohol at parties involving people under the age of 21. But I do hear that is a rumor.
Every now and then.
That every now and then.
Unverified.
It is a completely unverified rumor that these kind of things happen, especially after the drinking age was raised from 18 to 21. We can't say that alcohol was at any of those parties.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But at this particular party that she went to, it seems it probably wasn't, because there were only like 2 or 3 people there, and they were playing video games.
Yeah, the first party she went to that night, it was not what she was looking for.
No, she was looking for something a little bit more social, a little bit bigger, with a lot more people and some fun. And I think she was looking for some of that alcohol. She was looking to blow off steam and things. But the first party she went to was just a bunch of friends of her, like a few friends of hers, playing video games for the birthday, and she got very bored.
Yeah, now she was with a friend of hers, at least in the first part of the evening, right? So she goes here, the party's no fun, she's with her friend, and they continue walking.
Yeah, they heard about another party happening in another frat house, and apparently we're not going to say that there was, but apparently the draw was there was rumors of alcohol.
Right, probably just only rumors.
It's probably just only rumors. We're not sure. We do know that Kristin did become intoxicated based on testimony from other people.
Yeah, so at the next party, she does apparently find some alcohol. And again, adjusting the freshman year, wanting to have some fun, trying to fit in. There's some drinking, maybe a little too much drinking. And that was probably something that affected a lot of people around her.
Everybody wants to blow off steam. Apparently she was drinking enough that the friend that went with her decided she was just going to leave and go back to their dorm.
Right. And Kristin did not have her purse, ID. She had no cash, credit cards, and she didn't even have a key to get back in the dorm.
Right. She left all that stuff at home because she didn't want it to get stolen at the party or forget it. Like it's kind of, it seems a reasonable forethought when you say, I'm going to be safe. I'm going to be with friends. I'm going to be okay, but I don't want to lose any of my stuff.
Yeah.
So I'll leave it in my dorm room. We're not going that far. We're walking.
She even had to borrow the key from a friend to get back into the dorm.
Yeah. Her friend who went back gave her key to get back into the dorm.
And that would come into play later because friend would realize, wait a minute, my key's not here. She's not here. Something's wrong.
Right.
Yeah. So now we go to the next day, which is May 25, or 2 a.m. So we passed midnight.
2 a.m. 2 a.m. That's in the morning.
Early in the morning. And we see that two college students happen upon Kristin, but she's not in great shape.
No, she was passed out on the lawn of the house where she'd been at a party. And the two students, Cheryl Anderson and Tim Davis, decided to try and help her get back to her dorm. So they kind of physically picked her up, and she kind of came to at that point, and they helped to, carry her a little ways.
Yeah, it was walking distance. They weren't driving or anything. They were walking back toward her dormitory. And then they were joined by somebody who evidently becomes very important to this case.
Yeah.
Paul Flores.
Paul Flores, yes, Paul Flores. Now, the three of them carried Kristin for a little while, but then Tim Davis kind of had to peel off because he lived off campus. So he was heading home himself. So he, went to his car to go home. And that left Cheryl Anderson and Paul Flores with Kristin Smart heading towards the dormitory.
I think we should note at this point that this was not the first time, as far as the reports go, that there was contact between Kristin Smart and Paul Flores. Other people at the party reported seeing him talking with her, kind of, in hindsight, they would have said, kind of being creepy. And there was one instance somebody had reported they heard a sound, looked around, and Paul was on top of Kristin, but they weren't sure if they had fallen, if he had done something to her. Either way, they saw him on top of her. They got up, and that was that. There's another instance where somebody reported that Kristin was kind of being flirtatious with him and brought him into the bathroom and was just talking to him, and he was kind of confused about what was happening. They come out, and Paul Flores addresses the guy that she was in there with. So there's been contact, allegedly, between Paul Flores and Kristin Smart prior to this moment. So this is kind of a pattern of behavior at this point that Paul's showing up in relation to Kristin Smart.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe a little planned, like that he just happens to pop into the situation and say, hey, I'll help you take her back to the dorm.
Hey, funny seeing you guys here. I didn't. What were you doing here?
Yeah, totally accidental. And I think it was Cheryl Anderson who said that Paul Flores seemed a little too eager to assist.
Yeah, that may have been her hindsight.
That's true.
On the matter, that she see that in the moment she might have been glad to have the additional help because Tim was leaving and she had Kristin herself. But in hindsight, with everything else that happened, that we'll say she may have said, well, he was a little too eager. Of course, he may have been a little too eager, but it does seem that he was a little too eager to please both of them because he did have some advances towards Cheryl. Because Kristin was still apparently out of it. Like she was able to walk, but she was not very coherent, and she was being propped up by Cheryl and by Paul. And Paul was kind of like making advances towards Cheryl and even apparently tried to kiss her. And that was when she said, you know what, I'm going to go. She wanted to make sure she got Kristin back to the dorm, but Paul said, no, I got this. I'll make sure Kristin gets back to her dorm. It's right over there. Like they were in sight of the dorm, and which is why Cheryl felt it safe to leave. So she peeled off because she really at that point felt that Paul was very creepy.
Yeah, and the dorm at this point, they were very close.
Yeah.
120 feet.
Yeah. Like they could clearly see the door.
Yeah. So it wasn't like Cheryl left miles from arrival. She was right there. It was a short putt. Figured, he can't mess this up.
Yeah, short games, get it in the hole. All you have to do is get him to the door. So she figured it was okay to leave. And yeah, Paul was being very creepy, she felt, which was not the first time that anyone had said that Paul was creepy.
He had nicknames in school. Chester the Molester. What was the other one here?
Yeah, back in high school, he was being called
Scary
these kinds
Paul,
of things.
Psycho Paul. So we learned later that he has a history of this.
Yeah. Especially around women. Apparently, like in high school, there were a lot of women who were very uncomfortable being around Paul Flores, or they report now that they were very uncomfortable being around him. And I, given some of the other things that have happened in between what happened to Kristin and now, I can see very easily that them being inaccurate reports, and there's enough of them that seem to corroborate one another.
So this is an important juncture in the story, right? We have Cheryl Anderson. She decides that, again, they're so close to the dorm, not a big deal. She leaves. This is the last time Kristin Smart would ever be seen.
Yeah. The next morning, her friend who had lent her the keys went looking to see if she could get the keys back and couldn't find Kristin. Couldn't find the keys. All of Kristin's stuff were there.
Untouched, unmoved.
Everything was unmoved, like her bed was not slept in, and like it was all just exactly the way it had been when Kristin left that room.
Right. So we see the university police get involved.
Yeah.
Right. But the missing person report wasn't filed till 3 days later.
Right. Well, her friends went to the campus police to try and help find her, and the campus police told them they couldn't file for 48 hours, which is a thing many police departments say. And it is the stupidest thing, the stupidest policy to have. There is no law that says you can't file it's just the police don't want to do it because in general, they'll find the person. And if the person's not actually kidnapped or dead and they find the person alive, it's usually like, yeah, I left on my own. So the police don't want to waste resources, but the biggest problem I have with that policy is the first 48 hours after a person's murdered is the most crucial part. There's a TV show about that called The First 48. And if you don't find clues, that's the detectives on that show always say, if you don't find clues within the first 48 hours, you're never going to solve it.
Right. And in this situation with this university police department, their workload should have been very much so reduced during this time period because most of the people they deal with are students. And most of those students were not on the campus. Mm-hmm. And it's not like they're sending up helicopters and search dogs. All they had to do was go find the last people that saw her, and it would have led them right back, likely to a person that could have been responsible.
Well, the one thing that they did do that day was called her parents. Said, hey, is Kristin with you? No, she's still at school. Oh. Thanks. Click. Hang up. That's it. They just tried to check in and see if Kristin had gone home because that was their premise. There's a reason they didn't do any investigation. Oh, she probably left on her own. She went home, went off for vacation. It's Memorial Day. She probably just went out.
Went out camping, I think they speculated as well. She probably just went somewhere.
Yeah.
Left all her stuff, has no money, but probably just went somewhere.
Yeah. She's hooked up with some people and went camping or something. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. And in that time, before the police even started doing anything, really, but they were just dismissing everything. Kristin's friends got a whole bunch of people together to start searching. It became a really big search effort on campus to try and find her, and nobody could find anything.
No success. So when the police finally decide they should start acting like police officers and investigating the situation, they do go right to Paul Flores.
Right. They do ask questions of the last people to see her, and it leads them right to Paul Flores, and they try to talk to him about things. And, of course, he says he has no idea that he walked Kristin right to her door, opened the door for her, put her in.
Right. And then he walked to his dorm, which was not far away. So the police said, look, there's no evidence of a crime. Then we see that 2 days after, we see that they arrest Paul Flores for something completely unrelated to Kristin Smart's disappearance. Turns out he had an outstanding warrant.
For DUI.
For DUI, right? So again, you see like this police department without a lot to do. They have a student of the university with an outstanding warrant. Why didn't they just go serve the warrant? Like, I don't understand. Were they waiting for something?
It's the university police, so it's a DUI. That's immediate. Let's get them. DUI. There can't be any alcohol on this campus. Remember,
That's right.
there's no alcohol anywhere on this campus.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal. They got to take care of that. But they arrested him for that. During that time, people were still searching to see if they could find her. All right, so this was 96. Later on, there would be a tie-in to another case that we reviewed, the Scott Peterson case, because Scott Peterson was actually in school at that time.
Yeah, at Cal Poly.
At Cal Poly. He was there at Cal Poly. And during his case, the media made a big deal about how he might have been involved in Kristin Smart's disappearance. Right?
Right.
But at this point, the only person that the university police have been looking at is Paul Flores. And they talked to him briefly. He said he didn't do it. And then they pick him up on the DUI. And they let him go.
Yeah, it seems strange that they wouldn't just arrest him when they talked to him the first time. Maybe they don't know what that outstanding warrant means. Maybe they're just they might have been reading it upside down.
Maybe.
I'm convinced that seems to be...
Was a standing on the head warrant?
It's like, I don't see anything here. I can't even read this.
Well, and so there's some strange things about even that interaction between him and the police. He had scratches. That's when he had a black eye.
Right.
And he gave one story then. He gave a different story to friends. Gave a different story later. Said he had to go clean up concrete.
Said he had he got the black eye playing basketball.
Right, and then the next story.
But the friends that he supposedly was playing basketball said now he showed up with it.
Yeah, right. So
And had given them a different story about where the black eye came from.
And the story he gave police was later on. He gave police a story of I was taking out my car radio and hit it on the steering wheel, and you just picture that and you're like, what? But how did that even? So there was pieces.
Steering wheels just attacking people.
You got to watch out for them.
Got to watch out for the steering wheels.
They will come right off and get you.
Right.
So even at that point, there were some strange things, some red flags that perhaps if they had pieced them together at the time, if the right people had been involved, thinking the right way about it, perhaps they could have seen some red flags.
Yeah, they were definitely slow off the mark. So even after all this, right, they have him changing the story, being attacked by the steering wheel, more senseless steering wheel violence.
So senseless.
It would be 16 days until they would search his room.
Right. More than 2 weeks before they'd actually go search his room.
Which, with the theory of the crime at this point, would have been a likely crime scene.
Right.
Problem is that the semester was over and the room it was empty. The cleaning crew came in and likely destroyed any meaningful evidence.
He'd moved out of that dorm room and they cleaned it up to be ready for the next people who were going to come in there the following year. Which means they likely used a lot of industrial cleaning chemicals and things like that. But interestingly, when other police departments became involved, they brought in the cadaver dogs, right? And they did 3 different dogs, 3 different occasions to follow for the scent of human decay. And I'm not one to say the cadaver dogs are 100% accurate because they're not. They're an indication, they're a tool. They really, I don't think anymore that they're even admissible as evidence, but they're a good place for police officers to be able to start looking at things. But they brought in the cadaver dogs, which hit on Paul Flores' room.
So if I remember correctly, they searched 3 different dorms. Each dog searched 3 different dorms. None of the handlers of the dogs or the dogs were given any indication what the previous dog
Correct.
hit.
They all went in blind.
They all hit on the same spot in Flores's room. So then they tried to do some control of that, and they took out certain items. And they lined up trash cans, identical trash cans, and the dog hit on Flores's trash can every time. They took out the mattress, I think, and then the dog hit on that corner of the room where the mattress was. Again, going in blind, didn't really know what was going on prior to that. It wasn't given any indication about what to look for or anything. So, yeah, maybe not 100%, but there were definitely a lot of factors there that would lead a reasonable person to think, I think there's something here. This was a lot of different coincidences.
There might be something involving this dorm room.
Yeah.
And we know that Paul Flores was the last person there, so we got questions for Paul.
And I think that was not I think that was not entered in the court hearings because I think the certifications maybe on the dogs were questioned or something.
I know that was a problem in the Scott Peterson case.
Yeah, that was a big problem in the Scott
Peterson case. Is that with this one as well,
case,
or am I mixing them up?
I think you might be mixing them up.
That's possible.
I don't think that they entered because they didn't find anything else.
Okay.
Like they didn't, like that's all they had. They just had the dogs coming in, and like if that's the only evidence you have, then not much we can do with that.
Sure.
But it does lead investigators to look a little bit closer.
Dogs are notorious for not reminding the police about when their certifications expired at the fair.
Yeah.
Rarely do they ever use their calendars.
I mean, the captains tend to tell the officers when they need to go for their gun training, but the dogs, they lose track of the dogs. And the dogs don't bring up the certifications.
It's not like they're not even using their phones correctly.
It's like they don't care. It's like the dogs don't care.
They're just indifferent.
Yeah.
Attacking steering wheels that attack people, dogs that don't remember to renew certifications.
This case has it all. This case has it all.
It really does. It has everything. So we see that a grand jury was convened in this case, and there were proceedings that were sealed, and no indictment was handed down. This was 4 months later. And after that, the case really, really stalls.
Yeah. Kristin Smart's body was never found. Like, that's a very important thing. Like, at the time the grand jury indictment had come in, no body. And then we still, to this day, there's not been, as far as we are aware right now, as we're filming this, Kristin Smart's body has not been found.
She was declared legally dead 6 years after she disappeared. Yeah. So then we go all the way, we skip all the ways past 2002 when she was declared legally dead to 2016. And the police spend days excavating an area at Cal Poly. Some items were found, but the police, they're not talking much. That seems to be something, it's a pattern in this case. So we move from then, 2016, all the way to 2020, and the police confirmed that 2 pickup trucks were taken into evidence. Both belonged to the Flores family back in 1996. So I guess they sold them or whatever, and the police chased them down and took custody of them. On February 5, 2020, just a few days later, search warrants were issued for 3 different locations in California and 1 in Washington State. And again, we see some things that seem to be moving around, but police aren't talking about what they may or may not have found. There was also a warrant. One of the warrants was for the home of Paul Flores, but another was for his mother's home.
I think the other was his father's home, Ruben Flores.
Yeah, so we see the police are searching property of the family.
Now, the interesting thing is that when they were searching, doing the initial search, they had searched Paul Flores's father's house, Ruben Flores's house, and they didn't realize at the time that his mother was living in another house that she owned that was a rental property, but they didn't realize she was living there at the time. So Paul had said something in an interview that he had to go clean up concrete at his mother's house. And as far as they knew, mother's house was father's house. It was the same. They didn't know that they had kind of split up and she was living over there. So it wasn't until a while later that they would search the rental property, and that ended up becoming a very big area of interest.
Yeah, it was a huge area of interest because of the planters.
Right, the planters. And concrete and
in the
concrete
backyard
poured and dirt poured placed over concrete, and an earring found over there that the family would say is
Flores's mother moved out and then rented it out to other people, and one of the tenants found a earring in the driveway,
and it matched something.
And it matched necklace. It's actually on one of the most famous pictures of Kristin Smart. It was used on all the signs that her parents and lawyers put up, or the parents and their lawyers put up all over the place. She has this necklace on, and the earring matched that necklace. Mm-hmm. So the tenant reportedly gave that earring to the police. The police don't know where it is. It vanished.
Wasn't logged into evidence. They don't know who they gave it to, and nobody can find it.
Nope.
Yeah. So they're consistent. I'll give them that.
The other thing at the Flores house, his mother's house, that was the creepiest thing ever.
I can't get past this one.
Oh, it is creepy. It is really creepy. Yeah. Kristin was a lifeguard, right? And she often got up very, very early for that job. It was like 4:30 in the morning. She would get up, and she used her watch as her alarm so that she didn't wake up the rest of her family.
4:20, because they were wondering if it was a marijuana reference.
Oh, right. Yeah, it was 4. She'd get up at 4:20. So a couple of years after her disappearance, the new tenants are in the house, and one of them happened to be up that early in the morning, was outside, and started hearing this really high-pitched beeping sound and could not figure out where it was coming from. And then kept checking in on it every once in a while, inside the house, like in the kitchen, right near this planters, kept hearing it. And eventually it just stopped. But it was the same time every day, every time they checked on it.
It was right outside of the bedroom window.
Right outside the bedroom window.
People,
yeah. And just this high-pitched beeping. I've had one of those watches, that Timex watch. I lost it under my bed, and it had an alarm going at like 6 a.m., and it was aggravating until I found it and threw it away.
So I agree that was a creepy thing. I try to picture that. I'm in a house that I rent. I find out later that it's kind of some questionable activity, or that it's a subject of an investigation potentially, and then I hear this beeping right outside my window at 4:20 every morning, and I start to put pieces together, and I think, wait a minute, there's concrete underneath this dirt. I have no idea what's there, but I hear this beeping at 4:20 every morning. Police are constantly questioning things here. People are coming by constantly. There's mail being sent to the house saying, just tell us what happened, things like that. And these people have no idea what's going on. And you put pieces together and you think, is it possible that Kristin Smart is buried right outside my window and that is her watch beeping? I mean, that gets me, that gets me.
Now the theory is that her body was moved right from that.
Yeah, it seems that the theory is her body was moved several times. As in April of 2021, this year, prosecutors announced that they believe Kristin's body had been buried underneath the deck at Ruben Flores' house, but had been moved recently when they investigated after they served the search warrant. They said that biological evidence was found by using ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs, but they have yet to reveal what that is.
Right, and Ruben is Paul's father.
Yeah.
Right, so you have... So let's now look at the... let's do the update, and then we'll move to the theory of the crime here. So the update is that Paul and Ruben were both arrested.
Yes. Yeah. In April, they were arrested and charged with... Paul was charged with first-degree murder, and Ruben was charged with accessory after the fact, I believe.
And that's really all we know.
Yeah. That's really all we know about it. They haven't released anything. There's sure to be a trial, I'm sure, but...
I just saw that it was just postponed, as of today or yesterday or something.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Even more recent update.
Right. Yeah, things are happening currently in July 2021.
Does it say who motioned for?
I didn't read into it, but I can look at it.
Or maybe it was just the court, maybe an administrative delay. But I'm wondering, what team is looking for more time?
Yeah, I don't know. I'll look at it right now.
Yeah. So, how old is Paul Flores right now, roughly? He's got to be up near 50, 45, 50, something like that. There's
Pause.
26 years.
Yeah.
25 years since he was missing, and he was college age then.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm guessing somewhere in the middle.
So he was 19 at the time?
And his
in
father, I
1996,
believe,
yeah.
is up near 80, right?
Yeah, I believe his father's in his 80s currently.
Yeah, so justice delayed, if justice is the result of this, like if there's a conviction, which we have no idea.
Paul would be in his late 40s.
So I think we should note here that the one of the reasons why it's getting so much attention right now, and why police are potentially anyway, why police are really looking into a lot of things. There was a renewed interest in the case because of a musician named Chris Lambert, who in September 2019 released a podcast about Kristin Smart, and he lived close by to her. Close enough that he heard about it growing up and saw the billboard and everything. And he remembers kind of following it or seeing it on the news anyway when he was younger. And then he remembers hearing nothing about it. So he just became very interested in it. And he's a musician. Not like he's an investigative journalist or anything like that. Just a musician that had an interest in it. Just kind of wanted to see what was going on. So he starts interviewing people and gathering all kinds of data, evidence, things like that. And it's a 8 episode, am I right on that? 6 or 8 episodes, I might be getting it wrong, but 6 or 8. And really renewed interest in the case, to the point where the police, it seems anyway, the police were starting to find new leads. We're starting to investigate more. We're starting to look into more places and look into more people and everything. And I really think that Chris can be credited with the new findings. That
he did bring a renewed interest in the case. Right. He got people who, fired back up about trying to figure out what this, how to solve this mystery and making sure that Kristin got the justice that she deserved. And, it brought fresh eyes, new investigators were able to look at it. So, and I think that gave them a priority.
And so he really presented a lot of evidence in that podcast, compelling evidence, things that maybe the general public wouldn't have known about otherwise unless they really looked into it. So really, I would consider him a hero of this case because perhaps we wouldn't know much of this stuff without him kind of renewing the interest and therefore having some pressure on those involved to really do something about it. And it really probably led to the arrest of Paul and Ruben.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine any solution to this case, any resolution without that podcast.
Yeah, it's called Your Own Backyard. Very, very, very much worth listening to.
Yeah, it was a very good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now that we have 2 people in custody, one charged with murder, one who allegedly helped. Let's move back to 1996 and talk about what could have happened. What was the theory of the crime? Now, again, the prosecution hasn't told us, but we are led to believe that Kristin Smart is dead. We're led to believe that the state is alleging that Paul Flores did it and that Ruben Flores assisted after she was already dead. So we kind of have some of the pieces going into that night, at least, again, allegations about what happened in May of 96.
Speculation, my speculation would be that Paul, instead of taking Kristin to her dorm, took her to his. Mm-hmm. And there was an attempt at an intimate moment,
right?
But Kristin kind of became resistant. She was definitely not in a condition to consent to anything, but he became forceful. She fought back, maybe gave him a black eye, some scratches, and then something happened. Something occurred where that resulted in her death, and then he panicked and called his father.
Right, because he did not have a vehicle on campus.
He did not.
And here you have a body. I don't know how much she weighed, but I would guess somewhere between 1 and 120. I mean, it's a lot of weight. And he's in a tough way. He's going to get caught. He knows he can't drag her body somewhere without being seen, picked up on a camera or whatever. So he has someone to call.
Yeah, he calls his dad. And one of the big reasons that we know that is because that wasn't the first time that his parents had covered up stuff that he had done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was one of the ones that was reported was situation in middle school. Paul was in middle school and had an incident with another student. Now, the student reports that he was consistently bullied and there was an incident where Paul just started beating him up, and at some point, both feet off the ground, kind of stomped on his head. Something really brutal, you know. Now, Paul reports it, of course, differently, that there was multiple people, and this kid was kind of beating up on him. He was fighting back, you know. The person who got the kid at that point, the teenager that got beat up, was in the hospital for weeks and had lost his sight temporarily, had lost memories temporarily, had kind of lost his with-itness, if you will, temporarily. So it was really bad, right? Really bad. And this is an instance where, according to those reports, that we see Reuben kind of come to the rescue again and kind of try to keep things hush. And obviously, I don't think it would be the last time, but this, even going back as far as middle school, they were trying to keep him out of trouble. Maybe they kind of realized that he had issues, anger or whatever else, and didn't want that to be known. And so would, you know, maybe pay people off or pay off medical bills, I think was the case in this. And really kind of become a crutch for Paul in that way and prevent him from learning these lessons himself.
Yeah, an enabler.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Of the worst kind.
Yeah.
Definitely enabled. And his family would be advocates of his in the media. Even I think to this day, his mom's still saying, like, he didn't do anything. I don't know why he's been arrested. Like, they should leave him alone. But she was saying that, like, the media is persecuting her and Paul and the whole family by focusing on him, and that he had nothing to do with it. Now, no charges have been filed against her, and it's possible that she didn't know. If the allegations are true and Paul did kill Kristin Smart, and Reuben helped dispose of her body, even if he took it over to her house, mm-hmm. and took the opportunity to use the planter project to hide the body, to bury it, put it underneath concrete, that she didn't know. She didn't know anything. She might have been asleep that entire time and never know. And so her, to her, it could be true. Like, that her son didn't do anything, as far as she knows. Now, I think that if she does, that she might have her suspicions. Of course, she might know. She might be. Never know. Yeah. She might have been standing there behind Reuben the entire time. She might have been in the truck going to help and help move things and help set things up, and said, "No, we're going to," and masterminded the whole hiding the body. We don't know. Equal possibilities there. What we do know is the police don't have any evidence of that.
Well, if we think back, if we go back to May 25, 1996, it was 2 o'clock in the morning when the second sequence started, the walk home and all that. So I would imagine that Paul was calling his father pretty early in the morning. That's a call that...
3, maybe 4 o'clock?
Yeah, I mean, it's a call that you would think the police would have found if they had searched the call logs, but also you would think the mother would say, "Hey, I noticed the phone's ringing." Like, did Reuben just sneak out of the house with a pickup truck? And
well, if they were living in 2 different houses.
Oh, they were at that time?
They were at that time. They were living in 2 different houses. So it might not have been, it might have been, since they didn't find a phone record to Reuben's, might have been that he called his mom. Mm-hmm. And then that she drove over and picked Reuben up. It's possible. Like that, if we don't, but again, that's speculation. Right. We don't know if the police didn't find a phone call. Like, we don't know what the prosecutors have. Like, they might have phone records saying, "Look, there's a phone call at 3 a.m. to, from that time."
Yeah, that would be highly inculpatory, I think. Like, why? I mean, I guess he could argue, "Look, I was up. Everyone knows I was up. I was just calling my dad." Right.
But again, if that phone call was made to his mom's house, then when they looked at Reuben's records for his house, they wouldn't have found it. And if they didn't think to go back, once they found out that his mom's living in a different place, if they didn't think that she had anything to do with it, why would they check her phone records?
I think we can see a pattern of enabling potentially with his mom as well, with Paul's mom, because there had been reports from people that knew the Flores family that Reuben was abusive in many different ways to his wife. And so obviously living in separate places. But for her to still be involved and really not make that known, that he's abusive, in many ways, I guess you could say that she was allowing or enabling him to continue his behavior. And so Paul would kind of pick up on that, I would assume, that if mom, her inaction, potentially, I don't know for sure, but her inaction says that, kind of sends the message that this is okay for dad to do. Okay, well, I'm kind of justified in my anger then too, and my potential abuse or ill treatment of women, because that's what I've seen. And I'm speculating on that, of course, but that's based on reports that people that knew them would tell.
Yeah, so I mean,
we do see from some other serial killers that the way their parents are treated or can impact them directly.
Learning. Yeah, and you see, again, Paul was quite young when he allegedly committed murder. Mm-hmm. So this was childhood, adolescence, where he was learning something. I mean, he apparently was involved in assault, and I think he had some other DUI problems.
In between. We know the one for sure at the time in the 90s, but we also know that he had several more in the intervening years.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was 8, something like that.
Yeah.
8 DUIs.
A lot more than you would ever want to experience.
And of course, we do know, like, I've been in drug and alcohol treatment for quite some time, and I know that one of the speculations is in the common wisdom in AA as well is that if you were caught for one DUI, you've probably driven drunk 100 times, at least.
Yes. Yeah.
So every DUI, you times that by 100, if not more, and you can say, that's how often he's been drunk. So if he's been caught for DUI 8 times, he's been driving drunk probably pretty much constantly.
Yeah, you have to imagine. So it's probably almost every time he would go out.
Yeah, which means that he's pretty much always drunk.
Yeah, which brings me to my the last point I want to talk about, which is the 25-year period with the proverbial sword of Damocles hanging over his head. So 19, 20 in that neighborhood, right? I think 19
Mm-hmm.
when the murder allegedly happened.
So he'd be about 45 now.
He's 44, according. So I'll give the update. I just happen to have it up here. It was a preliminary hearing. It was supposed to originally scheduled to begin Tuesday, but now it's tentatively slated to begin July 12th upon a judge's approval. It is okay. So Paul Flores is 44 at the time of this, and this was written July 1st. All right, so he's 44 years old. His father, Ruben, is 80 years old. However, they could not comment on the reason for the delay because there was a gag order in place. So that's all we know. But it's a preliminary hearing, so these things should be started.
But I want to know. I gotta know.
Yeah. It's interesting that they're going with the tactic of not filling in the public with this case.
I think that it's actually a really good idea, though, as we see in other cases how the media can really impact the jury pool. I think they definitely don't want that to happen. I mean, there's already been interest in the case multiple times, and they don't want to have the jury pool just suddenly tainted by releasing too much information.
They can't expect too much more in the way of cooperation from the public. The public's already cooperated for many years.
Right.
So, it's probably a smart move for them not to say much. But going back to the kind of mental state of Flores, potential mental state, we see 25 years where he, again, he allegedly did this, so he's thinking about this homicide.
Or trying not to.
Right, or trying to blot it out with alcohol, and maybe being quite effective. Willing to endanger the public with 8 DUIs he allegedly committed, and then who knows how many he may have escaped the consequences for. We don't know. But, willing to, DUI is so dangerous, willing to potentially kill people on the roads.
Yeah.
We know now we're in the United States, of course, but we know in Canada, that's a felony the first time, DUI.
Oh, yeah.
DUI is a serious offense.
Canada takes it real serious.
Yeah, really, even without the murder, with the murder part being set aside, I'm very
Don't
troubled.
set aside the murder part, by the way.
Keep watching the murder part.
Keep watching the murder part, but with the murder, setting aside the murder with Paul Flores.
Yeah, the DUIs are terrifying.
Yeah.
So we see that, he has a sword of Damocles dangling above his head, right? And, has to be every day thinking about, well, this could be the day I go to prison for life. No chance of being executed in California, realistically, but life in prison every day, right? He has reporters coming to him, people in the public coming up to him, asking questions. The little bit I saw, he was dodging, he's walking away. It's not
I think like every video I've seen of him from recently is him walking away. Not even saying no comment, just walking away. Just not even looking at the reporters or the cameras or anything like that, just walking away. And he's just trying to pretend that part doesn't happen, or not showing anything outward to that. And he hasn't had very many. I don't think he's had any healthy relationships, but he hasn't had very many long-term relationships either. And as far as I'm aware, the ones he has had seem to have come forward and said that they were rocky, to say the least.
If you can accumulate 8 DUIs, that indicates a pretty decent probability.
Or it's just really, really bad luck.
Yeah, it could be the worst luck.
It's like he's only drank 8 times in his entire life.
Just happened to stumble into the car.
Yeah. He's getting into the car. He's trying to hand the keys to somebody else.
And the steering wheel attacks him.
The steering wheel tried to take the keys from him. And the cop walks up, what are you doing? DUI right there. Like
the car started it.
Right.
Well, and if the steering wheel's attacking him at that point, it's pretty likely that the door, like maybe he was in the door, like, oh, here's the keys, but the door shut on him, forced him into the vehicle.
So the door and the steering wheel are in on it.
They are in on it 100%. Now it's a conspiracy.
That's not,
alien.
you need 3 people for conspiracy, I believe.
You can have 2 people.
Is it 2? Okay. Yeah.
So now we're talking alien lizardoids. Or, reptoids. Or whatever
Alien lizard humanoids? That's another show.
Yeah, right.
Check that out.
Yeah, so Flores, he seems to struggle with the alcohol consumption, and I can't imagine with that threat of life in prison, life could have been too enjoyable for Paul.
No, I mean if he did this, and we have to put it if he did. Right. It's an allegation. If he did this, he hasn't really gotten away with it.
No.
Right. Because he's been
in the purest sense of the word.
Yeah, I mean he's been in kind of the telltale heart kind of way of the Edgar Allan Poe-esque thing. He did not get away with it. Like the guilt and the like you said, the sword of Damocles is always hanging over his head. This isn't the cask of Amontillado where it's like, okay, yeah, I'm good, bye. This is the telltale heart where he's got guilt all over him and he's trying to deal with this. And if he didn't kill her, then it really is a very traumatizing thing to be accused of it for 25 years.
Good, you guys with references to literature. That was good.
Right.
That was good.
Edgar Allan,
I read.
Edgar Allan Poe really, he only lived to what, 30, or how old was he? He was in his 30s. Maybe
He was young.
Sam can check it out.
He was younger than you might expect when he died.
33, something like that.
Yeah.
Maybe Edgar Allan Poe, Sam. See, I did a video on him a while back, but I can't remember how long he lived. But it was not a long life.
No, it wasn't.
And there was no computer. He couldn't look up synonyms and stuff. That was all just through his reading that he put together, like The Raven. He's amazing.
Right, yeah.
Edgar Allan Poe was really, even as celebrated as he is, he was underrated, in my opinion. What do we got?
He died at age 40.
Age 40.
Okay.
Which interesting story for local lore for here in Delaware. The at the end of Main Street in Newark is the Deer Park Tavern. And at one point it was going to get torn down. But they found some evidence, as far as I know, that Edgar Allan Poe actually stayed there when he was alive and would write poems for drinks. He didn't have any money, but he was staying there and would write poetry for people and they would buy him drinks.
Yeah, he too had a bit of an alcohol.
And so the Deer Park then was saved by the Historical Society. It's not allowed to be torn down. And it's still operating today.
There you go.
Yeah, I think in the world of true crime, so many of Poe's stories connect to the dark themes that we cover.
Yeah, and then he himself apparently died possibly as a result of criminal action.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. He had a rough life, and it's reflected in not only The Raven, but I think Annabelle Lee as well. So you have like a mental health aspect.
Everything he wrote.
Pretty much, it was all very dark. Yeah, he didn't write nursery rhymes.
No. If he wrote nursery rhymes, they would have been the darkest nursery rhymes ever.
The interesting thing is Poe too is he really
way worse than Mary.
He was the father of the detective story, right? Yeah. He was the one that started that. Yeah. If you think back to Murders in the Rue Morgue, the line he has about the detectives having their minds hermetically sealed, that's so true. People get focused on certain aspects and think, no, this is what happened, and they eliminate other possibilities. Their minds become hermetically sealed. Right. He came up with that. Again, no internet, no vast knowledge of true crime stories because that wasn't a thing before him.
Right.
Not like he was a real potentially popular guy in town either. He's kind of town drunk, if I'm remembering correctly.
He was very drunk.
Yeah,
very drunk.
I can't imagine that people were just lining up to go and see him. Share their knowledge with him.
I mean, that was a time period when poets and writers could be incredibly famous and incredibly wealthy because entertainment was a necessary thing. Mm-hmm. And, people could be invited to some of the highest echelons of society to just speak a poem, right? But Edgar Allan Poe was not generally. I mean, I think there was a little bit of that at times, especially with book releases and things. But
The Raven.
Yeah. But in general, he just was in low-class taverns, like drinking his way, like selling, getting drinks for poems, like short little limericks. He would just come up with them on the fly while he was drunk.
Yeah, incredible guy.
If he hadn't died when he did at 40 from the incidents that happened, he probably would have died from cirrhosis very shortly after.
Yeah, I don't think he was long for this world. No. And back then too, life expectancies weren't what they are today.
No.
So 40 might have actually been.
No, I think the life expectancy then was about 65.
Was it that old?
I think it was. Yeah.
I know in colonial times it was like the high 30s. Now we're way after that with Poe, but I'm curious. Maybe you could check out
the difficulty with that. The difficulty with that though was that with calculating that is that there were a lot of infant deaths.
Right. You have to look at the.
So the average age that people would get to was lowered because so many infants died.
Yeah, you have to look at the mean or the mode.
Yeah. So I think
that if he died and what the life expectancy was in the year he died.
Yeah, I think if you remove most of the infant deaths, the life expectancy was somewhere around 65.
I'm impressed it was that long.
Yeah.
Wow.
And really, Poe is probably the hero of middle schoolers and high schoolers everywhere currently, because that's usually one of the times around Halloween that you get to watch a video or a movie, a show or something, because the Simpsons Halloween special comes on, and it's because of Poe. So I mean, he's that's when they're introduced to it, and he's the hero, and he's the hero of them.
Nevermore.
What do we got?
The average life expectancy was around 30 years in 1800 or 1850 when he died. 1849, really. So he's technically above it.
Yeah, but again, to Mike's point, if you survived the younger years, you could do okay. Yeah. It was the infant mortality that really drove the average down, pulled the average down. Yeah, so rough life for Poe.
Yeah, rough life for Poe, and for 25 years, rough life for Paul Flores. Not that if he killed Kristin Smart, I don't have a lot of sympathy for him, but it definitely was a rougher life than many would lead, with a lot of alcoholism.
One of the
not as much poetry.
Perhaps we don't know.
No, we don't know. I don't think.
We haven't heard about the poetry part yet.
We haven't seen a book, posthumously published Paul Flores poetry. Maybe in 150 years, they'll be as famous as Poe's.
One of the
I don't know.
One of the nice things about the podcast is that as
our
Chris
podcast.
Well, yes, but also Chris Lambert's podcast.
Specify these things, sir.
In your backyard or your own backyard, is that he's intentionally telling things kind of as they're happening to him. So he's recording interactions and so forth as they're happening. And so inevitably, of course, one of the things he would do is seek out the Flores family. Go see Paul, Ruben, Susan, anybody in the family really that he could make contact with. And so this is, to the points that were made earlier about he hadn't been convicted for these things, but he also hasn't really left the public eye since all of that. So when Chris Lambert went to Paul Flores's house, the second he went up there, all the neighbors were looking at him. And they knew why he was there, because so many people had done it before him. Just driving to his house, trying to figure out information, trying to get some kind of comment from him, a confession or whatever, constantly having mail sent to his house, things like that. Same thing with with Ruben Flores's house and Susan Flores's, the rental property. Constantly mail, people going there, and the neighbors were tired of it. I'm tired of people pulling up here real slow. They all knew what it was, and even Paul, Ruben, and Susan knew too. They saw somebody coming, and immediately I'm going in the house. I'm not talking to you, whatever. And they've had 25 years or so of this. And so you got to figure that if Paul did do it, then, he knew, he had to have known he's just going to be suffering this life of constant attention. And it's not like he's getting away with anything. Everyone thinks he did it anyway. So you got to wonder what's going through his mind.
Have you ever seen, it's been a long time, but there was a series of movies a while back. I think it was called Final Destination.
Oh, I love those movies.
And I think, fill me in, because you've probably seen it more recently than me. It's been a long time for me, especially from the first one. But if I'm not mistaken, it was something to do with some kids.
I saw that one in the theater.
Probably around, so it first came out. There's kids probably around the age of Paul Flores that somehow cheated death by not getting on an airplane that crashed.
There's a precognitive dream one of the kids had. He freaked out and they didn't get on the plane. A group of them didn't get on the plane, and the plane took off and then it exploded.
Right. So
the ones who survived, who were not on the plane, were kind of left under the specter of death.
Right. So the Grim Reaper, who's never, I don't think, clearly identified.
No, you're not. It's not seen. It's kind of, those movies are kind of death takes a Rube Goldberg stage. Right. It's all in all of those movies. It's just kind of how much can we make these coincidences happen and.
Yeah, so they're getting I'm making this up, but they're getting killed by curling irons and milk jugs and all these random things end up wiping
not
out.
Entirely wrong. I think one guy was killed. He was killed in a shower by the shower curtain or something
So everything in his life, everything in these young people's lives becomes lethal. And I guess I don't want to ruin the end, but spoiler alert for every Final Destination movie, but I think they all get wiped out, right?
No, actually, in the first one, most of them, 3 of them survive.
Oh, 3 survive.
Yeah, 3 survive, and then the very end is a gigantic sign coming down off of a building to behind one that might kill him. Okay. Even though they think they've survived and that they've gotten rid of the curse and it's passed over them, the indication is it's going to happen. And then, the next movie, we see at least one of the other people who survived is kind of in a mental institution trying to stay safe in a padded room. And of course, I think she does die in that movie, but then it continues to pass on. There's people who survive, but then
but they might not survive the
sequel. They might not survive the next sequel. And I think it's 5 or 6 of those movies at this point.
Yeah, so really the title is a little misleading because it's not the Final Destination. It's one version. And then you have many more Final Destinations.
Final.
Now we mean it. This is you have reached
the final destination. Are you sure? You sure?
Yeah. So I get the sense that not as
the title was really clever for the first movie because it was a reference to the airplane thing, it's a whole airplane disaster thing. The final destination of your plan of your trip plus the final destination of life is death. It's really clever. But then they decided to do a sequel.
Right.
So
yeah, there've been a few of them, right?
Several. Yeah.
5 of them.
You said
5.
I
saw.
Yeah, 5.
Yeah. So you see maybe this effect of the Final Destination here in the life of Paul Flores, that now the law, the very long arm of the law, has finally caught him, and maybe he'll find out the result. If he's found not guilty, then he truly is free. Right? Jeopardy's attached. I'm not aware of any federal involvement like hate crimes or whatever. So he'll be free. If he's convicted, well, if he did it, then he's getting what he deserves.
I'm not sure he'd actually ever be free though. If he's acquitted, there would still be public opinion.
O.J. Simpson, Casey Anthony, free.
Yeah, he'd be that kind of free. Everybody knows he did it, but somehow he managed to get away from it. The public would still be hanging over his head. Yeah. There wouldn't be necessarily the threat of jail time or death penalty or anything like that, but he'd still have the public looking at him, staring at him, coming by, trying to get him to confess to it. like, Paul, it's okay.
Which he could do, right?
Paul, it's okay. You've been acquitted. You know, they can't get you. You can tell what's happened. But, you know, maybe he'd have a book just like OJ if I did it.
If I did it.
Imagine it's the kind of name that if you gave, you know, you're at a restaurant, you gave the name Paul Flores, and they're like, Paul Flores? Everybody's heads whip around. And, nope, not me.
At least in that area of the country around
right, yeah.
around that area.
Yeah, he's become a notorious figure, especially considering he's not been convicted of any murder crime yet.
But it is interesting that his father was arrested as well at 80 years old.
Yeah.
But I have my speculations about why the prosecutors did that. I think they were trying to use, first of all, if he actually did help move this, it is a criminal action and does deserve to be tried for it. But I think that at 80 years old...
Yeah, I mean...
But the prosecutors, I think they were hoping to use that as leverage against Paul. And try and leverage a confession.
You know, maybe the prosecutors go, and this is just highly speculative because we have no idea if they're even talking to, communicating with him. But maybe they could go to Reuben and say, look, you know, you're 80, testify against Paul and it's probation or whatever. You know, like we pleaded down to reckless endangerment or something.
Given the way we've seen how he protected him in the past, I don't think Reuben would ever take that deal. Like, not ever. But I think that they're thinking that they can leverage Paul by saying, hey, your dad could die in prison. Like, even if he only gets a couple of years, he could die in prison. Do you really want that to happen? And I think that it seemed like that was going to work if we had a report that he started to say that he was going to accept something and then almost immediately pulled back.
Yeah, they told her parents, if I remember correctly, that for a certain amount of money or something, that he would give some information, but I think like hours after, a day after, that was rescinded. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, not like you were in Vandersloot, but...
Sounds like you're on
Vandersloot trying to sell. I'll tell you what happened for $250,000. Yeah, no, not like that. It may have been something along those lines of he was actually like he wanted to say something and then he can't. Like, I don't think that he can at this point. I think that if he did it, he's convinced himself that he didn't or that it was justified enough, and he's been hiding with it for so long that he'll never talk about it.
Yeah, you know, I think, you know, based on what we know, it seems like the case, they've mentioned biological evidence that seems to have been retrieved at property owned by somebody with the last name Flores. Right? That's kind of what we know.
Right.
That's certainly inculpatory, but there are no witnesses. Nobody saw the crime occur. The room was cleaned, his dorm room. Like, he's got a case. I mean, he's got a defense. So I can understand from a defense point of view why he's not, like, there's no talk about a deal. Mm-hmm. Right. At this point,
because, you know, I don't know, maybe Reuben had gone to see if he could find his son, was hanging out in his dorm room, and, you know, Reuben came back, and Kristin was there, and Reuben took Kristin and said to Paul, go hide in the car. Go get in the car. And then he did something. That's as plausible with the evidence that they have. But I really don't think so.
Yeah, well, it's going to be, the prosecution's got a challenge to, you know, without they have some biological evidence, but we don't know what that is. Is that something that could have kind of come off of her, like a transfer, like a DNA transfer, or is it something like a bone that, you know, you would need?
Right.
You know, if you were alive, you would have it. So, you know, is it the kind of DNA that shows that somebody's dead or that somebody was there? Right.
We don't know. I don't think we won't know until the trial stuff is over. Because if there's a gag order on it now, they're not going to let cameras in.
Doesn't seem like a camera one. No.
Doesn't seem like a camera is going to be let in that courtroom, and so we won't find out until after the trial is resolved, and they have a verdict. Then we'll probably find out when things become public record. And at that point, we might be able to revisit and review, or do an update show or something.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, for the sake of cameras, maybe we get Ronnie O'Neill on this one. Have him represent somebody.
I'll have him represent Paul. Oof.
We're onto something here.
This trial or the next, right? This is him coming back.
It'll be him coming back for the next one. Yeah.
This is the comeback tour. There we go.
All right. Well, on that note, we'll wrap up this episode. We will certainly try to provide an update when the case has one available that's significant, which might be some time.
It could be. Could be a couple of years.
Yeah, if we're already seeing a delay for a preliminary hearing, who knows when the actual trial will occur and how long it'll take to resolve. Although usually trials only take a couple weeks, but we'll have to see.
Yeah.
But it has to get started first. So that was this episode of the murder part. Any final thoughts about this case?
No, that I really do. I mean, I appreciated hearing all of the information, given about this. I can't imagine having any other thought other than the Flores family is involved in this, based on everything that I've heard from other people. So it sounds pretty straightforward to me, but I'm not involved. I've never had to look for evidence for anything before. So, try to think of things through the lens of maybe something else happened. Maybe there's something I don't know. But it's kind of tough for me to do in this, especially in this case.
While I think that closure is a myth, and it's not a real thing, like people, as long as they continue living, are going to have to struggle with things. I think that the Smart family deserves to have some answers of what happened to Kristin. And if the biological evidence they found is, human remains, then they'll have at least some answer. They'll know for sure that she's dead and kind of what happened to her. Resolution of the case isn't going to be super helpful for them. But I think that it is something that will give them a sense of an ending to that chapter. That Paul Flores finally has been captured and convicted, and he'll be done. So I think there might be some relief for them, but they're still missing Kristin, and they're going to forever.
Yeah. This is, in all this, kind of like all this speculation about what could have happened, it shouldn't be lost that there was a real victim here that lost her life, and justice has been, it might never happen, and at the best case, it's been delayed 25 years or more by the time we get an answer. So yeah, terrible, terrible tragedy. So that's where we'll wrap up this episode of The Murder Part. If you have any thoughts about this case, please put those in the comments. I'd be very interested to read that, any opinions, thoughts about this case.
Please be kind in the comments.
We will, again, try to give an update when one is available. As always, I want to thank you for watching. We will talk to you soon.